New study out this week shines new light on the pandemic's impact on America's poor. People in low-income counties died of COVID at nearly 2 times the rate of those in wealthier counties. That's according to findings from the Poor People's Campaign and the UN Sustainable Development Network. And during the Delta surge, the death rate for lower-income Americans jumped to 5 times higher. With me now, Reverend William Barber, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. Also with me, Marissa Renee Lee. She is a grief advocate and author of the forthcoming book, Grief is Love, Living with Loss. It is available April 12th. I am so happy to see you both. Reverend, I'm going to start with you. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, you and Reverend Liz Theo Harris write, quote, America's healing will not be complete until we address the poverty at the root of our COVID catastrophe. Looking at the study of the counties with the highest COVID death rates, talk to me about the impact poverty has had and what, if anything, from that study surprised you most?
Well, most of what it did, Alicia, was it hurt deeply. It was almost like the thing that I feared the most came true. You think about this, during Delta, it was 5 times higher among poor and low-wealth people. And the government didn't track this. We didn't keep a rate of this. The study opens by saying the pandemic didn't discriminate, but we did. And that discrimination was deadly. Vaccination status does not explain these differences. Counties with the highest death rates had a 45% poverty rate. And it looks at what people didn't have even before COVID, you know, the lack of insurance, the lack of living wages, the lack of paid leave off. We just put poor people at risk and kept them at risk, naming them essential workers. Many of them formerly had been service workers. And it's another reason why we're saying we must have, on June 18th, a mass Poor People's Low-Wage Workers Assembly and moral march on Washington to the polls. We can no longer dismiss what is happening to 140 million people in this country who are poor and low wealth, 43% of our adult population and 52% of our children.
Marissa, the loss has been uneven, so too has the grief.
Yes, absolutely it has. You know, I think in this country, unfortunately, we have come to normalize Black grief and Black pain. And so when most of the people who die happen to be people of color, unfortunately, I think fewer people pay attention. You know, even before COVID, Black children are 3 times more likely than white children to lose a mother. And by the time Black Americans hit 30, they are 3 times as likely to have lost a close family member than white Americans. And so I think as we take a step back and you know, try to examine what we need to do on the hopeful other side of this pandemic, there is a big piece around race that has to be addressed. Black people need to be given an opportunity to grieve and to heal. And that takes resources that, you know, per Reverend Barber, Black Americans often don't have in America.
Right. Reverend Barber, to that point, what do you want our government to take away from this study? What do you want them to do?
Well, first of all, I do want to make one thing. Black people in our study did die disproportionately, but actually in raw numbers, more white people died. And more white people are actually poor and low wealth in this country, 66 million versus 26 million Black. Now, that's not dealing with percentages. But what we want to say is we cannot be a country that continues to deny people universal health care, deny living wages, deny leave, and deny services. If we had been tracking this and looking at what it was doing to poor people and essential workers, we would have delivered services different. Again, because we weren't even caring about how it was impacting poor people. There was no research being done on that. There was no data being kept. In some places, deliberately, it was denied. We end up with this grotesque amount of death among the poor. Really, the pandemic's deaths didn't become the death of the poor. And we cannot continue to write people's lives off. And that's why poor people are saying we're not going to be silent anymore. We're building for this mass assembly on June 18th in Washington to demand an agenda in this country that begins with how do we lift poor and low wealth people? Because if you do that, then everybody rises.
Marissa, I got to say, this is one of the reasons I like speaking with Reverend Barber, is because he's such a systems thinker. And he's always thinking of these challenges in terms of system, how you move things forward, how you improve. I also want to zoom out, and this is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you, Marissa, which is we are a country living with an incredible amount of grief. We are individuals who have not yet processed our grief. I take Reverend Barber's point that there needs to be systems, reparations, systems healing in order to move forward. We also, at a very personal and community level, need to grapple with our grief and our loss.
Yeah, we cannot move forward in this country from this moment of immense and pervasive suffering without taking a moment to acknowledge all that has been lost. You know, as folks prepare for summer camp and vacations, et cetera, we need to remember that for millions, literally millions of individual Americans and people all around the world, there is no returning to normal because one of their people is no longer here. And so I think ensuring that, you know, we as a country, both individually and collectively, just take a moment to pause, to mourn, to acknowledge all that has changed and everyone who's no longer with us anymore. It's a critical component to the healing process.
Reverend Barber, I've got a minute left, but I want to ask you, your rally, June 18th, what's your message to members of Congress?
Is that poverty is a political choice. It's not a personal choice. Low wealth is the same. We do not have a scarcity of resources. We do not have a scarcity of ideas. We have a scarcity of moral conscience. And we're going to put a face on this pain. We won't be speaking for poor and low wealth people, but they themselves, like the young lady in Mississippi who lost 25 family members from COVID in a 30-mile radius. We cannot, as my dear sister just said, just go on and act as though things are normal. What caused that? What didn't we do in the richest country in the nation with the greatest health care in the world, richest country in the world, greatest health care in the world, and yet we had this kind of pervasive death? Something is wrong. We've got to fix it. We've got to look at it across the board, and we're going to demand that that happens.
25 family members. That is a horror. Reverend Barber.